Hello, everybody. My name is Amaya Tobias. I am an exercise science major, and I'll be presenting a bit about the effects of exercise on cognitive function. Um, this is a topic that I find pretty interesting and fun. I've been looking into it all semester, actually, so I found a lot of new information that I did not know before, and I'm excited to share a bit about it with whoever is watching. Okay, so let's start off with explaining this first thing. What is cognitive impairment? I hope you see at my citation at the bottom. That is where I got this definition. But it refers to a decline in cognitive function, such as memory, speech, perception, simple daily functions, and tasks. Um, I will like to preface if you're concerned or some of this sounds like you, do not be scared, do not be too concerned. At the college age, it is less likely that you have cognitive impairment, but if you really are concerned, there are tests that can be taken to see if you fit that criteria. Um, Cognitive impairment can lead to decreased physical function. Um, Sometimes this can be implied to as frailty. I like to think of a really nice older lady who struggles to walk, move, do simple things. She's prone to falling. That kind of is encompassed by the frailty criteria. And there is an association with frailty and cognitive impairment, but I also think that's because cognitive impairment is associated with elderly, so is frailty. So it's kind of a little triangle type thing. And then next, it could progress into more severe conditions like dementia or Alzheimer's. These are both severe forms of cognitive impairment, and they're both actually globally on the rise at the moment, which is not good. So hopefully we can work on that. Okay, next we have what are the benefits of exercise? I know not everybody in this class is a health major, but I'd like to think that some of you guys have heard some of this before. But exercise is typically associated with improving overall health. First, I have physical function. I have this referred to as the individual's ability to perform basic or daily living tasks like self care, shopping, that type of stuff, but also encompasses other things like mobility, strength, and endurance. Exercise can also manage chronic illnesses. When I say chronic illness, I refer more to cardiovascular, respiratory conditions. And if exercise is done correctly, these can be managed pretty well. And I feel this one is not so much as known of a fact, but um, at least from experience for me, it helps with pain. Um, I do know as I started to work out more, I've had a lot less joint pain. Um, and then there are also a lot of studies that suggest exercise improves the feelings of depression and overall mood. If you are in the exercise science field, I'm sure you've read or have seen, heard some research that is relevant to that. That's kind of a big exercise science point that I hear a lot. With all of these studies finding supporting data to that specific part, there is actually not that much data that looks into how exercise can impact cognitive health. Okay, so sure some people might be asking, why should I care about this? Okay, so research is actually very limited for this topic, and it is also inconclusive. There are studies that have conflicting results on the potential benefits of this. Um, Exercise, like other parts of your health, can be used as a non medicinal way to intervene in reducing the risk of development of cognitive impairment or cognitive illnesses, which can be more attainable and it has less adverse effects than when you are having drug intervention, for these conditions. Um, this can also teach individuals how to take care of themselves and let the importance of maintaining brain health be known. Okay, so I have chosen 3 studies. I have a lot of studies that I've worked with for this project, but I've only chose 3 that I feel are really relevant and really get to the point. So first, I have this study done by Kinsella in 2015, him and his crew. They had an exercise intervention, which was 15 minutes of cycling on a stationary bike daily. This happened over a 15-month period, kind of a long intervention, especially when you're going daily. There was a series of tests that were completed at baseline. This is before the exercise intervention and then post intervention. These would assess physical and cognitive functions. There were cognitive tests, the MMSE, that is one of the cognitive tests. There was the time up and go test that that would score your functional mobility, how far you were able to walk, how well you're able to walk, stuff like that. They did many other tests as well that I won't get into. And then performance was assessed every 3 months. It gave the administrators the ability to adjust the exercise specific to each individual in the study. And then the control group maintained a sedentary lifestyle. So they kind of just weren't active at all. Okay, for the next group, this was done by Lee and his team in 2022. This was the Brave program. It was referred to as a mobile app, the Brave app, a peer volunteer training, and then an exercise program for individuals with mild cognitive impairment. This is a more specific part of cognitive impairment. They completed 3 60-minute sessions per week for 8 weeks. The study was more group-based. There was 8 to 10 participants per group, and the control group in this study continued their usual care, whether that was not doing anything, medicine, any of that type of stuff. And then for the third one, this one was done by Lamb and his team in 2018. The exercise intervention was 60 to 90-minute sessions for 2 weeks for 4 months. It was a mixture of aerobic and strength training programs, and it was tailored specifically to each participant, and they did this at baseline, which again is before intervention, just doing a series of assessments, and then they would try to build up to higher intensity as the study went. And then their control group continued their typical care like the last one. Okay, now for the results of the study. So for the first one, in the exercise group, all variables accounted for improved cognitive and physical functions, but depression actually got worse than in the control group, which was not unlikely, but unexpected is a better word for that. And then the study, it concluded that aerobic physical exercise can be potentially beneficial to cognitive functioning, but there still needs to be more studies done to, confirm this. This is one of the more earlier studies on this topic. There's a lot more now since this was 10 years ago. Okay, a little happy guy for good results. For the next study, we have Lee and his team. Again, immediately post-intervention, there was not a significant between group difference between the two groups, control and exercise, but 3 months follow-up. This is 3 months after intervention, and they got checked up again. The exercise group had greater scores indicating they improved cognitive function, and it was concluded that implementing exercise was a feasible and effective in improving working memory, processing speeds, executive functions, and individuals with mild cognitive impairment. Oh, there goes my happy guy. And then in the last study, I did tell you guys that studies were inconclusive for this topic, so I figured I'd add this in. While both groups were showing a decline in cognitive function, the exercise group actually had higher scores on the specific test at follow-up, indicating that their cognition conditions worsened. And it was concluded that a 4-month exercise intervention can improve physical health, but it does not slow the decline of cognition. Okay. When looking at an article that is studying a health-related issue, it is important to recognize that there's limitations, and in more simple terms, these are more like weaknesses and flaws that a researcher is likely to face. More severe forms of cognitive impairment are associated with the elderly, so finding more research on younger populations can maybe manage more mild forms of impairment. And this is for the first one, that says mild cognitive impairment and other conditions are often associated with elderly populations. So more studies are concentrated on these populations. So the majority of the studies that I looked at actually do have this limitation. A lot of them had populations of ages 65 years or older. In the second one, exercise may not be beneficial to already frail individuals and can be difficult to complete exercise interventions on the elderly. Like I mentioned earlier with frailty, frail adults, and its link on elderly and cognition. In a study done by Yoon, I believe, if I remember correctly, frailty scores actually did end up improving though with the addition of exercise as well as cognition. And then for the last one, for the best results, intervention should be long term, but that is not always feasible. Especially when you're working with older populations, engagement and dropout rates need to be considered. And for long studies, you know, that can be difficult. There are a few other factors to consider. Exercise intensity can impact the outcomes of a study. These two studies are pro intensity, but there are some that do not support that as well. The first one says high speed resistance training can lead to more significant improvements in cognition, and then as physical activity became more intense in the other study, cognition improved. As well as group based activity can impact outcomes as well. While cognition improved, depression increased more in the exercise group than in the control, which this is the same thing from the study from before, the first one. This is like the authors determined that this was likely because the control group was able to choose their social activities and the exercise group could not. And then group-based peer mentor activity was a key part in this next study's intervention, and the majority of the participants were actually super satisfied and completed the study, which is not always likely when you have older populations and exercising. And then interaction was so much easier to maintain. And this was the study, the second one done by Lee. Okay, so this is a quick little fact done by Spencer, another author that I've looked at in the study. Up to a quarter of adults 18 years and older do not participate in an adequate level of physical activity, and this is increasing the risk of Alzheimer's by up to 40%. So while research does not always agree with each other, it's still inconclusive, not always the same. It should be concerning that cognitive impairment is a quickly global health concern, and there is actually no long-term definite solutions to stopping this. There is no cure, none of that. So it is important to find more research on the early stages of impairment, and this can be crucial into preventing the risk of developing the most severe forms of the condition. So it is advised by me, Amaya, to be active and go take care of your brain. If you have any questions, feel free to reply down in the comments or whatever the discussion thing is called. And here I have a list of all my citations. Thank you.